We move the conversation along to Chelsea then, Graham Potter. Obviously, we know the situation that Chelsea is in at the moment. How much trouble at the moment do you think, Tony, is Graham Potter in? Is his job at risk even at this point?
Well, he's in no trouble at all if the directors are going to stick with what they've said they're going to do, and the owner, you know, they want to completely move away from what Chelsea have done over the years. They want to bring in younger players. They want to produce younger players. They want to do, I read an article the other day, they want to do what Arsenal have done on a very similar lines. They want to get a younger team, a fresh team, and have a young coach in there moving them forward in that direction. Now, the problem that you've got with Chelsea, as you would with Manchester United and all the top teams in England, if you don't win games, you know, the supporters haven't turned up to wait a year, 2 years, 3 years until you get it right. So the supporters will be the ones putting pressure on Graham. Hopefully the directors, the chairman, the owners of the football club, you know, have picked a direction and picked a manager to go in that direction, and will stick with him and give him the opportunity and a chance to, you know, to achieve a little bit like Arteta, what Arteta has achieved at Arsenal. The problem you've got, Michelle, is the noise around losing games at big clubs. You know, it's real pressure, not just on the manager and the coaches and the players, but also on the owners.
Yeah, the mismanagement at Chelsea for a number of years now was always going to come home to roost, and unfortunately, it's the buck is stopping with Graham Potter. I feel for him at the moment. He's got a group of players that aren't his. He hasn't signed any of the players. I don't know whether João Felix was even his signing. You've got a lot of injuries. You've got a lot of older players. And the problem that you have is that in the time that Guardiola and Klopp have been in the Premier League, Chelsea have had 5 permanent managers. And as Tony's quite rightly saying, you look at Arteta, every player on that pitch, well, most of them, other than, say, Xhaka and Saliba.
He's brought in.
He's either brought in or developed. So it's his team. Same with Guardiola, same with Klopp. Whereas Graham Potter, he's got players from 5 or 6 different managers. They had a crisis meeting earlier on this week, which involved Azpilicueta, Thiago Silva, Kovacic, and there was one, and Jorginho, I think, was involved in it as well. 2 of those 4 players are out of contract in the summer. They've just let 2 of the best centre-backs go for free in the summer. So Graham Potter now has to be given the time to shape this team, to develop this team, because it takes time. Even for him when he went to Brighton, his first pre-season, he had a full pre-season, had his first transfer window. He won 2 of his first 9. Now, I don't know what you think.
I was going to come in, Dan. When I started management, which was almost probably before you were born, Dan, you were given 3 years. First year to assess the squad, second year to make the changes that was necessary, and the third year there had to be real improvement. It was almost set. You know, it was a 3-year plan all the way through. Now, you're lucky if you get 3 months, Dan. You know, what chance have you got in that short a period to change? Michelle, it's an absolute nightmare, really. You know, it's become
a brutal industry. It's a brutal industry.
England has it's become very much like a European setup where a manager would stay for a year or 2 and then go. And it would be taken that would be his time, a year or 2, unless he was really, really successful. And it's got like that in England. And you just hope there's some common sense prevails in respect to Graham.
Do you think, Tony, as well, because I've thought about it recently. Obviously, when he went to Brighton, he brought players in. The players that he brought in, it was their dream to play in the Premier League. If Graham Potter said to them, run through this brick wall, they would do it. And they all got on board. He goes into Chelsea where you've had Ancelotti, you've had Mourinho, you've had Conte, you've had Tuchel, you've had a Chelsea legend in Frank Lampard. Do you think straight away some of the players are looking at him as a manager and going, who's this guy and what's he going to do for me? I've won Champions Leagues. I've played for PSG and things like that. Is there an effect like that as well?
I'll tell you what the difference is, Dan. If you look at Brighton and look at their recruitment has been absolutely fantastic. You know, from Graham, the new manager has come in, and there's been absolutely no difference at all, because they've bought players with great characters, players who can run and players who can play. You know, their recruitment, Brentford's recruitment, if you look at some of the smaller clubs in the Premiership, their recruitment has been fantastic. Again, I go back to Man United, I'll go back to Chelsea. Their recruitment, you can't make out what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve as a football club. And, you know, I've said this before to my son, and I'll say it to other managers. Irrespective of how good a coach you are, unless you've got the right players in the football club with the right attitudes, with the right discipline and the work ethic that you need to be successful, you're going to struggle. And, Graham has been left with a group of players, like you say, who have gone through 3-4 managers. And once you start hearing 3 or 4 managers back, the next manager who comes in and starts back in, you ain't going to jump as high as what you did with the first one. So I think there's got to be an understanding at Chelsea that he has got to have the opportunity, the chance to bring players in. And hopefully, their recruitment, I think, has been poor. Even this year, it's been poor. Hopefully, they'll buck themselves up and start bringing in some decent players for him.
I think that there's a huge lack of balance as well. So you look at the recent game that they lost against Fulham, and Graham Potter from the start was like, right, we need to be on the front foot because we need to score more goals. They started really well, but then they were more suspect at the back. The midfield doesn't have anywhere near as much athleticism as it needs to have. And a lot of teams are winning the battle in the midfield against Chelsea and then going on to win the game. So Graham Potter's best 45 minutes were against Bournemouth, where he had Reece James at right back, which brought out the best in Sterling. He doesn't have fullbacks either. And the modern day fullback now, they are absolutely... They're vital to any team that wants to be successful.
I think the other thing is, and this goes back to Chelsea again, this is another bit of criticism for the football club, is that if you look at a lot of clubs, the medical side of it is, and the physios and everything else, absolutely spot on. They get things right. You've worked with me, Dan, and I've always said to my medical people at all the clubs I've been at, any muscular injuries, I'm going to go berserk. If they do something to their knees or their ankles or their joints, you can't do anything about it. But muscular injuries, that is out of the... I'm not having that. You're getting paid to make sure that they are physically prepared for those games. And I think if you look at Chelsea's injury problems and record, it's just scandalous. So, Graham's going into a football club where I don't think the recruitment has been right. I also don't think the medical department have come out with shining colours neither. So I think, it's not just as a manager, you're given all these to get on with. You need time to look at the recruitment. You need time to look at the medical side of it and to get those things right, while trying to win some games. So it's not, what people think. They just, they see with their eyes a game for 90 minutes, but it's more than that. Running a football club, organising a football club and setting a football club up, there's more to just that 90 minutes on the pitch. And if you're not prepared, if you're not organised, if you haven't got your club all pointing in the right direction, pointing at that one star, I don't think you're going to be successful. I think there's going to be things that will drop off on the way if you're not controlling it.
I get that it's a lot more than just Graham Potter and what he's been doing. I completely get that. But once you lose the dressing room, it's really hard to come back from that. And based on the body language that these players are showing, do you think he has lost the dressing room, Tony?
I'm not so sure whether he's lost the dressing room. I'm not so sure that that's going on. I just think what's happened, Michelle, I think there's a lot of players there who've been there a long time. There's a lot of players there who've had a lot of managers. And like I say, you become very, very comfortable within it. I'd have been desperately disappointed if I'd have been Graham Potter and I knew the chairman was having a meeting with players. That would desperately been disappointing for me, because I wanted to sort it out. That would have been my responsibility, to sort the players out and to sort the group out. Players have to take responsibilities. There's players there who are underachieving, but are they underachieving because of the manager? Are they underachieving because they need to move? Because they've played their part and their time's run out as being a Chelsea player. So, like I say, he needs time and he needs the opportunity and the chance to reorganise, I think, the recruitment, reorganise the medical side of it, and then hopefully push them forward. Exactly the same as Arteta has done with Arsenal.
Well, it's a big game tomorrow for them then. I mean, after losing to Fulham, they move on to another London derby, Danny. If they lose tomorrow against Crystal Palace, is that the end for Graham Potter? I mean, if they do lose, it does mean that they are 13 points behind the Champions League spots.
No,
if Newcastle win, of course.
Yeah, it can't be. It can't be then for Graham Potter. We're talking about someone who's been there since, since September? He's not even had one full transfer window.
We've seen shorter tenures, let's face it, Danny.
Well, that was under different leadership and different ownership. So you would hope that, Chelsea's always been a quick fix. If you look at them winning the Premier League, they'll win it, then they won't win it for 4 years. Then they'll win it twice in a row, then they won't win it for 3 years. So there has to be an understanding now that Graham Potter, if you're going to have anything, if you're going to have any success, you need to be able to pull everything back and start afresh. Because let's not forget, Pep Guardiola's first season in charge at Manchester City spent a lot of money. I think he finished 4th. Klopp, I think he finished 6th, didn't spend any money in the January when he came, I think the October, November time, and evaluated in the summer. So for me, if you're going to go in a different direction, Todd Bowley obviously now being a new owner, he has to, as Tony's just said, he has to give the manager time, let him implement what he wants to do, because I think we're gone. The days of quick fixes are finished now. And we're seeing that with the success that we're seeing in the Premier League now, with Arsenal and how they're doing, with Manchester City, and to a lesser extent, obviously, what Liverpool have done in recent seasons as well. And Manchester United now, when you look at what they're doing, they're giving the manager the keys and saying, right, what do you need to do? What do you want to do? You are the boss of this football club, instead of having to answer to everybody. So I hope that Chelsea and their ownership take a step back.
I think, Dan, the big thing as well is you've got to sell it to the supporters. I think you've got to sell it to the people who come and pay their money week in, week out. Mm-hmm. And you have to be really honest and very open with them and say, listen, this is a change of direction, a massive change of direction. We're not going to buy titles anymore. We're not going to go out and spend big and do. We've had an academy that's been one of the best academies in England for the last 10 years. They've spent more money in that academy than most other clubs. So they've got some really, really good players coming through that they've never played that they've loaned out and they've been successful somewhere else. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to have that. We're going to have that as a base. But we're also then going to go out and get younger players to bring into the club, to work with a younger manager and a younger coach who's really done a real top-class apprenticeship at Brighton. And we're going to run it that way for the next 2 or 3 years. And in that time, hopefully, then we'll see the shoots of a new direction, a new start, and a new way of how this football club should be run. And then they've got to sell it to the supporters, because the supporters will be, Michelle, the supporters will be the ones who will be moaning and groaning if they're not winning. If they don't win tomorrow, there'll be more pressure on him and more pressure. And that's when, the chairman has to come out and he has to say, listen, steady down, please. This is the way we're going. And if it means we're going to have stumble after stumble after stumble, fine. But I can assure you, we have got a direction. We're going to go and form an identity that will make the club better in the next 2 or 3 years.
My last point on Chelsea as well. Let's rewind the clock back to the summer. Thomas Tuchel spent a lot of money, brought players into the club that he wanted to bring into the club. Aubameyang was brought into the club because he'd had success with him at Dortmund. All of a sudden, Tuchel is then relieved of his duties. Graham Potter comes in. He's got injuries galore in the centre-forward position, got a real lack of a centre-forward. He brings Aubameyang on against Manchester City, then takes him off against Manchester City in the same game. And now he's playing with Havertz as a centre-forward, who, in my opinion, isn't a centre-forward. You bring João Felix in. He obviously gets sent off in his first game after looking really promising. And supporters are expecting Chelsea to be challenging the top 4 when you've got, no disrespect, but you've got Aubameyang as your lone centre-forward. Look at what other teams have got. And that's where it has to be now stripped back. And Graham Potter needs to be told, listen, this is your club now. You can do what you need to do in the summer. There's going to be a lot of players that are going to be leaving on a free, a lot of older players. Now, if we can reinvest someone, if we can bring someone into the club, you can now go and do what you want to do in the next building phase.
Yeah, I guess it's something that Chelsea fans have to do now, that's being patient, which is not something they've had to do in the past for a long, long period of time.